Welcome to the Business Resilience Decoded podcast, brought to you by Asfalis Advisors and the Disaster Recovery Journal. Crisis management in today's world is ever-changing, and this podcast is our commitment to help you navigate successful outcomes for any crisis you may face. I'm your host, Vanessa Matthews. I specialize in providing insights and solutions for crisis, continuity, and resilience across industries from real estate and healthcare to terrorism in the airline and transportation worlds. No matter what industry you're in, this podcast will provide you the tools to build resilience in your organization. Welcome back to another episode of the Business Resilience Decoded podcast. One of our most downloaded episodes this year was our recent podcast on risks to watch out for in 2023. And in this episode, we are unpacking the data from the 2023 OnSolve Global Risk Impact Report, which details the most prominent risks and what to do with that data that we're seeing regarding these risks and challenges across the world. So to discuss these findings, we are joined by Chris Hurst, the VP of Value Engineering at OnSolve. Chris, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much, Vanessa. Awesome to be here.
I'm excited. So for those of you who were fortunate enough, Chris and I had the first chance of working together at DRJ in the spring of 2023 in Orlando. So feel free to go back to YouTube to watch that panel. It was super great. And I had a chance to learn a lot about Chris. So I'm super excited for the audience. I think you guys are going to be in for a real treat. Before we get things started, Chris, can you talk a little bit about you and your background so people have a better perspective of where you are coming from?
Awesome. Yeah, thanks so much. So I think of myself as a risk practitioner as well as a technology enthusiast. And so what I mean by that, I graduated from West Point 2001, became an Army diver soon after, then worked in infrastructure planning in Iraq and Afghanistan for 4 years, 2006 to 2010. Kept running into the challenge of not getting situational awareness information fast enough to my teams, had dotted line to security, and still just had a lot of challenges with getting the right information to the right people fast enough. Later, went on to become a director of enterprise risk management at Mercy Corps. It's an awesome NGO, and we had people in operations in about 40 countries. Ran into the same challenge, getting the right information to the right people about changing risk on the ground in a way that wasn't siloed. So speed, needed granularity, needed the right information. Ultimately, those two experiences led myself and a co-founder, a former Green Beret, to start an AI machine learning company that we grew from 2013 to 2020, and then became the OnSolve Risk Intelligence platform in 2020. So it's awesome to be here.
Wow. So there's a few things. I have two comments and one question. So one comment is, it's clear that you have a lot of experience as an entrepreneur, it sounds like, growing a business.
Much respect for what you're doing as well, Vanessa.
Look, we need to talk more about that separately. The second comment, thank you for your service. And my question is, do you still like to swim since you were a diver?
You know what? We actually live in Los Angeles now, and I've got 3 kids, and one of my favorite things to do is get all of them in the ocean. So now it's not just about the, Chris in the water. Now it's get everybody in the water. But yes, absolutely.
I love that. That is awesome. So going back to the 2023 report, can you talk a little bit about how the data was collected to give us a better understanding of how you were able to come up with the global view of the risks for us to watch?
Yeah, absolutely. So, like I said, for 10 years, we've helped our clients get real-time situational awareness using AI, ML, analyst. So you can think of those as like individual alerts all over the world, right? And so those are storm strikes, protests, disasters, shootings. And so we're seeing all these events happen to our customers and to our clients. And, that data comes from the news, social media, government feeds, National Weather Service, Storm Prediction Center, Hurricane Center, USGS, on and on, right? Domestic, international, now we're adding foreign languages. But what we realized was missing about, and this is starting about 2 years ago, is we wanted to aggregate this data and look at what's changing. And so this year, when we looked at the data, it was 9 million incidents. It works out to more than 10 incidents every minute. And we simply asked, well, what's different this year? And this year we saw 3 big themes for the United States. Now there were many themes across the world, and when you drill into cities and states, it can change. But across the United States, we wanted to address these: extreme weather, the rise in extreme weather, the rise in infrastructure failures, including power outages, and then the rise in transportation incidents. There were many more, but those were the big 3.
Interesting. 10 incidents every minute. I feel like that has to create significant stress on first responders, emergency managers, etc.
Yeah, I mean, if just we're all in the space, right? So anyone you talk to, you say, well, like, when was the last blue sky day? And the answers are like, yeah, I think there was that time back in 2017 when when there was no crisis, there was nothing to worry about. There's a significant rise, and they're becoming increasingly connected, which we call dynamic risk. We'll talk even about that dynamic risk here today.
So to your point, infrastructure failures are one of the top 3 across the United States. And from the report, they've increased by 807%. Can you talk a little bit about where you're seeing some of these failures, and then specifically, what are the key causes?
Yeah. So listen, it's common if I just said, to our audience, close your eyes and think about infrastructure failures. One of the big things that will probably come to mind is natural disaster risks, like the Texas freeze in 2021, or the risk of blackouts from extreme heat. And I want to be clear, those are real risk. And in California, climate change is making extreme weather events more frequent, and that peril is increasing. And there's another factor that we're seeing in the data, which is in 2022 and 23, we're seeing more human-generated risk to infrastructure. So you can think about the attacks in Washington and North Carolina on substations. And then sometimes we're even seeing risk from vulnerabilities from foreign actors. So Canada, other countries are seeing a risk of cyber attacks related to infrastructure as well. Just going back to the human-generated piece, I want to make this clear. Those were Americans that shut up substations. And so we're working with organizations like Power Magazine to talk about vulnerability assessments for those infrastructure nodes. And if you think, just pausing, what makes this so difficult from the risk practitioner side, from our clients and the Fortune 2000 and the 30,000 clients that OnSolve has, it's a very large attack surface. If you think of that way, like work from home, the hybrid work models, now it's not just my facility, it's all the facilities where people live, and can they take calls, and can they schedule, can they jump on Zoom? And then that same principle of a large attack surface is also true for the energy companies. There's tens of thousands of substations across the country, and the hardening at many of those has been traditionally just like a chain link fence. And so that has real significant impacts for the economy, for business, and for individuals.
Risk is on the rise. In fact, new data from OnSolve found that around the world, infrastructure and technology failures increased by 807%, and transportation incidents increased by 296% from 2021 to 2022. Having insights into the top rising risks year over year can empower you to make informed decisions about how to proactively mitigate and respond to critical threats. OnSolve is here to help to keep you ahead of risk complexity with the platform that helps you detect, anticipate, and mitigate physical threats that impact your people, places, and property. The 2023 OnSolve Global Risk Impact Report highlights the top risks to watch this year and how to communicate them with your C-suite. For more information about OnSolve or to read the full report, visit www.onsolve.com/GRI. Okay, I have questions on questions, but so in Charlotte, we are currently experiencing a train derailment. Like literally the train is off the tracks. And there's significant things that have come up about where there was opportunities for things to be done differently. And now not only is the equipment failing, but also people don't feel protected or safe. And so, one of the other top incidents that you mentioned from a US perspective was transportation. And in the report, it shows that incidents from transportation have increased by 296%, which is very, very high. And so we also just did a podcast episode on the back-to-back train derailments that we saw in the United States. And so I'm curious about what are some of the other transportation failures that you're seeing with this report?
Yeah, you're exactly right. I mean, so for us, transportation incidents includes aircraft, rail, and road accidents. And yeah, clearly the East Palestine train derailment created massive operational and safety concerns. The risk of dynamic risk, or the theme of dynamic risk, is also important here. And that's, risk A causes risk B, causes risk C, and it's closely related to severe weather, which I'm sure we'll talk about soon. But like risks like severe storms and hurricanes and blizzards, those create hazardous conditions that drive transportation challenges. And so you can think about I-70 closures due to blizzards, or hurricanes like Nicole and Ian disrupting travel in the southeast, and even the responses to those hurricanes. So with one county in Florida says, now we're evacuating, that has significant impacts up the Florida coast, right? Because other counties have to coordinate. So you get dynamic risk even in the response. And then wildfires block transportation roads. And I want to be transportation routes. I want to be clear, it's a U.S. concern. It is also international. So for our clients or partners who outsource in Pakistan and the Philippines and have teams there, recent floods in Pakistan and tropical storms in the Philippines also present significant transportation problems across those countries.
So I'm hearing a lot of weather-related incidents or natural causes. So, for example, in Charlotte, it's a human issue. It's a lack of maintenance. It's a lack of understanding. Here's all the different aspects of equipment, and here's the schedule of when those things need to be updated. What other aspects might you be seeing from that are causing the transportation failures that might be a little bit different than weather-related?
Yeah, I mean, I think so. A very large thing that we're seeing within transportation and across the risk that we're seeing is something we call the institutional gap. And by that, I mean, if you think about, so this is a big idea, Vanessa, and this is something we're really seeing, where the way that societies work together to solve problems, whether it's police or CDC or local maintenance regulations. So you think about, well, where do regulations come from? I think the institutions themselves are really being stretched. And again, this is whether you sit on the left of the political spectrum or the right of the political spectrum, the institutions, the Army, NATO, again, CDC, police, hospitals are really, really being stretched. And I think you're seeing that in the maintenance concerns related to rail as well.
I would agree with you in that. And I would take it a step further that most organizations are. We were with the customer in Texas a few weeks back. And that was one of the things that we shared in our closing remarks is you're being asked to continuously do more, manage more threats, manage more risk, and know you can't get any more headcount or budget. So I got to handle more with less. Seriously?
Oh, for sure. I mean, that's part of the value of data. If do more with less is a phrase I heard, as a young Army officer in 2001, right? And also now the data shows that there really are more risks, and it is a more complex environment. The assumptions we had about stability as an operating environment in business, in the 2010s range, those aren't holding true anymore. And so I think data can really help with making those arguments, exactly as you said.
So let's touch on the third pillar that you talked about, the third highest incident within the United States from the report, and that is extreme weather. So we are no strangers to the climate crisis that we're seeing globally. And to your point, depending on where we sit on the political spectrum, that might be a debate, but today it's not. And your report showed that extreme weather increased by 42%, not as high as the other two. Extreme weather can be unpredictable, as we know. So what is your recommendation on how people and businesses can prepare for that?
Absolutely. So I think the first piece is to use data, just like the Global Risk Impact Report, right? And I'm even going to go a step further in talking about data. This is a catalog of events across the last year, 9 million across the United States. An even better step would be to use your data, right? And so there are solutions like Risk Insights that would allow you to even make this really tailored for your organization. But the first step is that data can help prepare, can help make the argument, can help, just like in business and fundamentals of business continuity and ISO 22301 is do those threat and vulnerability assessments for your locations and see in the data for yourself and for, more importantly, for your leadership team. The second piece is that I wish it was the case that all leaders and organizations and institutions could make great decisions on data alone, but often it takes a narrative. It really does take a narrative to reach the animal brain and how we make decisions. And so you can use your own narratives or narratives of crises that have happened to others in your industry, where you can help your leadership team learn vicariously. And then the third kind of lesson I'll just say is that these often data is in narratives are going to show that organizational response needs to evolve, that organizational structures needs to evolve, that supply chain teams are going to now be involved in more and new different ways. Plans are going to get updated, but that typically takes resources. Change takes resources. And so if you can frame the change in terms of value outcomes, this is my new title at OnSolve, is helping clients frame like what's the business value in addition to safety and security of our people that we're going to get from the preparation.
Did you say change creates resources?
Change requires resources almost always, right? So if, for example, if you're going to say, okay, so now we have the severe weather that we're seeing the increase in the data, we're seeing the increase in our own data in Florida, maybe now we need a monitoring solution. Maybe that's technology, maybe that's people, maybe that goes all the way to a GSOC or a VSOC, but all of those, there's a resource requirement, right? And so if you have to resource change, then how do you do that? You do it with narratives, and also the narrative, the solution has to be framed in value and business value. Business says, I think business leaders tend to be ethical people, and also they need to see how does this affect the bottom line or revenue?
Yeah, no, I love that. So a couple more questions for you. I'm curious, you talked about the incidents from a US perspective, and you also shared, that there might be, companies that are supporting things internationally. Are there any top trends, maybe your top 1, 2, or 3 that you saw from the report that focuses on the international landscape that you can share?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, so what we haven't addressed at all today is the geopolitical risk. And as I've kind of said throughout the call, there were assumptions of stability around the world in the 2010 range, as Iraq and Afghanistan aside, like supply chain leaders thought that they could single thread everything through China. And then clearly COVID and the shutdowns there showed that single threaded supply chains through China were not, that was not a good plan. We're clearly seeing the risk from Ukraine, software companies having their software engineers now go be like fighters to save the Ukrainian homeland. So NATO is getting stretched, and clearly the risk of China and Taiwan and just great power competition. If you haven't looked at if our audience hasn't looked at a GDP chart of US GDP and China GDP, it's fascinating. And this is the new world that we're walking into.
Okay. Well, to your point, we've only touched on a few things. You guys have been tracking several things. And so there's so much more information in the OnSolve Global Risk Impact Report for 2023. What else can readers expect from the report, and where can they go to find it?
Yeah, so I'll hit what else can you expect? I mean, we didn't talk, just next on the list is the rise in shootings and crime. And, we know this being in this space, we know this in narrative, we're clearly seeing that in the data. I want to give you'll see this in the report, the brazen nature of those shootings, the brazen nature of events in general. I mentioned at one point, I'm in Los Angeles just a couple of weeks ago, there was a street takeover where there was a gas station with 100 people, like smash and grab, bank jugging. The brazen nature of crime is changing, and that, again, I think that goes back to institutions. But you can see, anyone can download this and review for themselves at onsolve.com/GRI Global Risk Impact Report.
That's pretty interesting. I'm not even going to go more on that because that could be a whole nother 30 minutes. So I think you alluded to it before, but as we close out, so now that we have the data, what do we do? Because some of us are doers and we want to know what we need to do, right? So can you provide some guidance on that?
Yeah, absolutely. So how does this data help? I mean, the first thing is, as you're looking at resourcing change, right? As you're looking at improving your monitoring, whether it's people or technology, or you're looking at pushing monitoring down to different staff, right? Because our clients or partners may be only single threaded as a single business continuity director. Having the data can help justify building out the program. I wrote in my notes, see, I told you so. It's almost like the business continuity director, they know they've been living under, threats with no blue sky. And now the data is starting to really prove that out. So that's the first, is in program justification. The second way that this data can be used is in siting. And so by siting, I mean like where do we put the new thing? If we're going to put a new facility in Mexico, where do we put that? And again, the GRI is going to give you a large, country level analysis, check out risk insights for like individual facility. But then the third way is all of us in business continuity and security are thinking about threat and vulnerability assessments. And so using that data to do your own assessments or to trigger, I'll also be thinking about, assaults or theft or that sort of thing.
Wow. Chris, thank you for being here with us today and for joining us on the podcast. While it's my second time having the opportunity to hear you speak, what I can say that has been consistent is I learn every time. So thank you so much.
Vanessa, I'm thrilled to be your colleague and thrilled to be on the podcast today. Thank you so much.
Thank you for listening to the Business Resilience Decoded podcast, brought to you by Asfalis Advisors and Disaster Recovery Journal. Make sure you check out the show notes for this episode to see all the upcoming events, programs, and ways we can support you. Make sure you subscribe to the show wherever you get your podcasts, leave us a review, and share it with a friend. Thanks again, and I'll talk to you in the next episode.